Well, thank you, sir, very much. Appreciate you all having me. How many of you on a Friday afternoon, when you saw that there would be an opportunity to attend an hour-and-a-half block on OPRs, wanted to gouge your eyes out with some pencils? Anybody? Okay, yes. All right, I appreciate honesty. That's good. Well, hopefully, even though it's a Friday afternoon after lunch, we will take some time that will be time well spent on your part. So I have traveled from Austin, Texas. The President was gracious enough to sign the omnibus spending bill, so we are funded through the end of the year. So I won't have to fly home, and drill won't have to be canceled tomorrow, so I'm thankful for that. We will start out today. By the way, I flew from Austin, Texas. It's 80 degrees there now. It's 48 degrees here, so I don't know what the deal is there. But if you will open your handout, everybody got a handout. Flip open to that back page. I want to show you a real, no kidding, OPR, OER, from 1943 on a guy named Omar Bradley. So this is not a fabricated deal. This is a real, no kidding report back from World War II. So anybody heard of Omar Bradley before? Yeah, famous World War II general. So when you look at his report, if only it could be this easy for us. So first of all, tell me who's old Bradley's raider there, if you flip open to the very back side. Patton, who's his additional raider? Ike. Well, we've stacked the deck for old Bradley there, hadn't we? Well, when it comes to writing the report, making good bullets, matter of performance, what does Patton say about Bradley there? One word. Matter of performance is superior, period, done. Doesn't look like he wants to say anything else. How about where he ranks? Hey, of all the generals you know, where does he rank? He ranks number one. I know all of them. My goodness, if it could only be that easy for us, well, we would be out of this briefing in 5 minutes and move on. But unfortunately, we're not three-star generals. We're not leading combat units across the fields of Europe in one of the greatest conflicts in history. So it will be a little bit more difficult for us. So next, let me start out here. As you look at the handout, we'll go through some more stuff, but I want to give you some overview and disqualifiers. So what on earth, why would a guy from Texas, a guard dude, show up here and teach you how to write OPRs? What do I know that you don't? Well, let me give you just a little bit of context to my background. Way back when, I told the fellows over here that I didn't wear my flight suit today because I'm a disqualified pilot. But many moons ago, flying airplanes, I was happy, did some instructor stuff and pilot training, and then on to C-130s after I had some initial back problems. And then I got disqualified altogether after more back problems. So where do you think they decided would be a great place on active duty at Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas for me to work? Now that I couldn't fly airplanes. Who said it? Yep. Exec. Oh, make him the exec. That'll be a great job. I'm like, no, please, could I go do something else? Maybe could I go be a doctor? I don't know. No, they said be the exec. So I did that at the group level, then at the wing level, and then some dude at the Numbered Air Force decided it'd be a good idea, and then it just went on from there. So over the 4 or 5 year period as a captain and a major, I spent a lot of time kicking and screaming against my own will being an executive officer, which led to proofreading, editing, writing thousands and thousands of OPRs, EPRs, and PRFs, promotion recommendation. So that's where I come from. And then when I got to a Pentagon assignment in A8 at the Guard Bureau, I realized that Guard folks perhaps need a little extra help with this. And so there's a lot of things that, now that I've been in the Guard for 4 years or so, I found that it's hard to fix in the Guard. There's a lot of things we can't fix. When it comes to writing good performance reports, this is one of those things that takes a little work, but is definitely fixable. So back during that time, we had some boards where there were some changes in mentality, like your wing commander spoke about. Well, we had a number of people who were awesome Guard officers going up, sitting in group commander slots all around the Guard, and they got turned away from federal recognition to 06 because their record was weak. And so we want to try to fix that. So what I've filtered Colonel Botsford over there, and I appreciate his help in getting me here and take care and feeding for me, is a step-by-step guide. It's about 16 pages long, walks you step by step through the process. So I came from the flying world, and then after that, squadron commanded in the maintenance world, so we have checklists and procedures and all that sort of thing. So I wanted to make this pilot-proof, pilot-friendly here, checklist right here. So that's what we have. You start out step one, and we're going to walk through those steps. So I'm going to take us from the subjective and move us to the objective. I'm going to give you a process to do this that's actually something that you can take a bite out of and tackle. But one of those things that you're going to post to your Wing SharePoint site is just a writing guide. And at the back of that writing guide, if you look on the front at the executive summary, you'll see as I go through and talk about writing things, I'll say, hey, insert an action word here. And then there's a little thing in parentheses that says A5. What that means is in attachment 5 of my little 20, 30-page handout, attachments included, you can find a list of action words. You can print that thing out, and when you go to write, this is what I do. I have my list of action words, my list of adjectives, so I need a little juice sometimes to help me write better. So I encourage you, it takes about 30 minutes to read. It'll reinforce everything that we talk about here today. So as we get ready to talk through this process, I want you to just realize that we're going to talk about the way things are, not philosophy, about the way we think things should be. So how many of you think the fact that we don't want to put any white space, even a word's worth of white space in the form, does anybody think that's a stupid idea besides me? All right, anybody else? Okay, yeah, so sometimes I think maybe that might be a little bit excessive as well. But we're not going to spend a bunch of time thinking about how we wish things were. All I'm going to do is take all that active duty knowledge that I had from way back when, and I'm going to tell you the way the active component views strong OPRs, and that's how we're going to move forward with this. And so on federal recognition boards, the active duty doesn't have a sole voice, but they have a big voice. Their colonels, their general officers sit on our boards side by side with guardsmen, and they get a vote. So that's why as we talk about this competitive environment, we have to up our game a little bit to make sure we're squared away. Next, keep in mind there's no patches on my slide, so Steve, I've never worked in an FSS in my entire life, and God willing, I never will. But my views do not represent the Force Support Squadron here or necessarily Guard Bureau, and the reason for that is I'm going to tell you what the AFI says, all 317 pages of it, of AFI 36-2406. But I'm also going to tell you a lot of techniques, and so when it comes to official guidance, I will respectfully defer to your FSS, NGB, and state headquarters to get that official guidance. But hopefully this will be good help. Next. So why do we want to write better? We already had some discussion about that a little bit. The way I prefer to judge people is really twofold. First, when I decide if I'm going to hire somebody, give them a job when I was a squadron commander, or as the state public affairs officer, now if I'm going to hire a technician full-time, what is the number one way do you think I use? What's the number one thing I use when I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to hire that person? What I know of the individual. Have they worked well with me? Have I seen them interact positively? Does anybody else use your own personal knowledge first and foremost? Yeah, most of us in the room do, and that's what I love about the Guard, because we know people, we know our folks. The second way that I prefer to make judgments on people is about calling somebody else. So if I were in this wing, I'd call up Steve and go, hey, I got this guy that's trying to interview for this maintenance job over here. I know he worked for you before. What do you think about him? And then I trust him, respect him. He gives me his opinion, and then I go from there. Does anybody else do that? Has anybody else with a commander badge on made that phone call before? Right? All of us have. I guarantee you we have. That's the way I prefer, but there are times where there are limits to that system. And this is where tomorrow when we talk about EPRs, where your enlisted folks will be in the room for that, where I really have to do a job selling them on the fact that this matters when it comes to writing EPRs, because that's a new thing. We've been writing OPRs for a long time, so I think most of us in the room think at some level it matters. We have to do a little bit more selling for them. But there are times when if you go outside this wing, outside the 128th Air Refueling Wing, are you well known? If you go outside the great state of Wisconsin, are you well known? Yes or no? Could someone make a judgment on you based on the fact that they don't know you personally? All they have to do is go and look at your record. Or that interview that lasts just for a few minutes that sometimes could be a hit or sometimes could be a miss. So stat tours, special opportunities, job interviews, Fed Rec boards, all that stuff matters, and your record plays a huge part in that. But the other thing that we want to bear in mind is for those of you, and I just turned 40 a few months ago, for those of you who are approaching 40 or past 40, how many of you have your plans changed over time? Anybody in the room besides me? Man, my plans have changed over the past 10 or 15 years a great deal. So for those of us in the room, and this, by the way, what we're doing here is not just an OPR brief. This is a leadership brief with OPR and EPR implications. So when we're going to infuse some leadership stuff and talk about it here. But this is part of that leadership thing. For many of us in this wing, you all perhaps have not been in a different wing than this. For many of you, you spent most of your careers, maybe your entire career, if you're a guard baby, right here in this wing. And you don't plan on leaving, ever. And that's great. That's good. But sometimes what we think is going to happen to us as captains or staff sergeants isn't what happens to us 10 years down the road. And so then I've had direct, sad situations that have occurred where all of a sudden, maybe then there's a military member, where they have some medical issues with their kids, and man, they would never leave the state of Wisconsin, but now they want a stat tour. 3-year stat tour, get that TRICARE, whatever the reason is. Maybe some things family-wise have not worked out for them in their personal lives, and now they want to go move on and try something else. Well, if we have, for the past 5 or 10 years, not set up their records to be competitive for those unexpected opportunities, things that they didn't think they wanted as a staff sergeant or a captain, now as a lieutenant colonel or a senior master sergeant they want, then we're doing them a disservice. So this is what I found in the Guard. We have great people and sometimes sucky records. They don't really match. In the active component, this is what I found. Sometimes we have a glowing record, but a sucky dude, and they don't really match. So I don't want you to write every report strong. I want us, collectively, as guardsmen, to accurately reflect where people are. So if a strong person needs a strong record, weak performers need weak records. So I want to make sure that they match. And it's my opinion that it's a leadership failure when those two things don't match. And since there's no enlisted people in the room here, let's just be honest. It's a leadership failure on us because no EPR gets processed without one of our signatures on it. Is that correct? You know that's right. And of course, for us as officers, we have multiple levers of command that review those things. So this does require a little bit of additional attention. Next, so step by step, we're going to show, just click through these, leadership, performance, stratification, support, and all that leads up to potential because that's what we promote people on. So step 1 is making a plan. So we're going to dig into this a little bit here. Number 1, what you cannot do is, now for OPRs, we have those on an annual basis. For EPRs, for most of our force besides AGR and stat tour guys, they're on a biennial basis, which means every 2 years. So whichever one you're talking about, what you can't do is show up the Saturday morning of drill knowing that an OPR closes out the next day and go, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start writing this thing. I'll crank it out real quick and then I'll be good. Is that a recipe for success or failure? It's an absolute failure. If you sit down, if you've been frustrated with OPRs, a lot of it has to do with this step 1 here. Because folks will sit down with a blank sheet of paper, that blank Air Force 707, and they'll try to crank out an OPR, and it's very difficult to do. Even experienced writers like me, if I had just sit down and start making up stuff and trying to remember what happened 10 months ago, it's not going to go very well. Next, so you got to begin day 1 of the rating period. You got to make this plan. You got to review the information that's out there. So how many of you have deployed in the past 5-10 years? Most of us have, right? So when you deploy, you get a letter of evaluation in Air Force 77 out of the desert most of the time. Maybe there's training reports. Maybe you've been to SOS in residence over the past year. Maybe there's other record information that we need to review. So we just want to make sure that we have all that context taken in there. And then we want to kind of determine what is this officer's trajectory. So especially at the more senior levels, we want to go, all right, this captain's fast burning it. I think he or she is on track for squadron command. Or maybe there's somebody in this room that one of your big bosses has a plan for and you know about, and you just need to be informed by that. Nothing wrong with that. That happens in every wing, everywhere. But to determine where he or she is going helps determine what's going to go on the form as you rate their performance. Next, I got to see any record gaps or weaknesses. When you have senior leaders that offer, hey, if you want to come talk to me about your record, that was a great offer, sir. That's good feedback to get. One of the things that I look for, are there any PT test failures, any adverse action? One of the things that's been codified in recent updates to the AFI is our requirement, and for us as officers, again, leadership brief, just want to throw this in your mind, that we are now required, if we break a criminal law and are convicted of doing so, for something that we would be required to appear in court for, generally speaking, so something worse than a traffic ticket, don't worry about traffic tickets, but things that you're convicted of, we're required to report that to our chain of command within 30 days or the next drill, whatever's first. So AFI and the AFI 36-2406, this outlines it in detail in Chapter 1. So before you or your folks do any reporting, you could go see a JAG, and you can make sure that you know what the rules are there, but we just need to be informed. Doesn't mean that it's going to make it on the report or adversely affect the report, but it is something that we need to take into account and something the Air Force is now requiring us to do. And because most of our force isn't full-time, it's easy for that stuff to fly under the radar. So for us as officers, if we have one of our mid-level enlisted folks that lets stuff fly under the radar like that, and then 3 years later it comes out, now there's some teeth in the AFI to go back and hold them accountable for things they did not do. Map out next career steps. So where you're at right now, what's your next job? And to be able to know what your ratie's next job is an important thing as the conversation needs to take place. This is all teeing up for the next step. Then we determine how we help the ratie get there. So can we put in the ratie for an award? Can we put them in for a Saigon Award, or maybe an Officer of the Year, or whatever local awards you have here? Can we make sure that we tee up that, do unit awards like the Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, like was already mentioned? Or do we need to work an early upgrade? Can they upgrade from AC to IP early? Can they go ahead and get their 7 level if they're a maintenance guy? Maybe we push them for that upgrade. All that stuff I have in my mind when I get ready for this next step. Next. What? Next. So now, step 2, man, this step hugely important for every one of us as officers in the room. Hugely important to provide expectations and feedback. What are the, I've heard it said before, what are the 2 things people want to know when they show up to work at a job? 2 things that they want to know. They want to know what's expected of them, and they want to know how they're doing in relation to those expectations that you've set. Generally speaking, that's what all of us should do, but here's what happens around the Air Force, around the Army, around corporations, is that the conversations that need my career. I remember some of what they said. Shoot, I even remember some of what they did. But I remember all of what they wrote on me, because even from 15 years ago, all that stuff is still in my record until the day I separate or retire. And the reports you write will be the same way for the ratees that you have. So we want to make sure that we do this right and we treat our people right and give them what they have earned if they've earned a strong report. That's my time today. I am thankful for your attention. Does anybody have any questions before we close out? And I'll turn it back over to your bosses here. Yes, sir.
Real quick, sir. Is there any resources out there to look at different PRF reviews or anything like that to get, sometimes words meanings change through this process, and sometimes this word's good to use and sometimes it's not good to use. Is there any a resource we can use or a place we want to find that kind of stuff? We got different boards and that kind of stuff.
Well, then there isn't a conglomeration of hey, don't use these 27 words. That to my knowledge doesn't exist, and that would be a moving target, right? Because that would be subject to people's opinion. What I would say is that if it's time for you to write your PRF, or you're getting close to it, and you don't have a lot of experience doing it, what I would suggest doing to make it easy on your 06 bosses is go back, watch my video. I got some handouts on that. I show you what right looks like on multiple PRFs. You take your record holistically, decide how it's going to work out there, and then what I'll offer the officers in the room is if you need a 5-minute buddy check, holler at me. I'll give your PRF a 5-minute look over and send it back to you and go, looks pretty good, or hey, it needs some work. I don't send me 27 reports and go, hey sir, can you look at all these and give me detailed feedback? Because I'm not going to do that. But I'll be happy to help you if I can with that. So if you've got a few words in there like, hey, should I use this, should I not? I'll be happy to talk through it with you. I know your chain of command. Here's the deal. If you're trying, if you're really legitimately trying, and you did your best work and you produced it, it still may suck. But my guess is your bosses are going to be happy that you're trying and do a little mentorship, and then you go back to the drawing board and get a better product the next time around. And now you're able to do this thing we call mentorship and pass on the torch and the skills so that we don't pass on our sins of the National Guard of today to the generation tomorrow, that we can kind of correct it from there. Does that answer your question with a non-answer answer? Very good, yes. Go ahead.
So ideally through time, your OPR is going to show diverse experience, increasing responsibility. So in looking at the duty title, right, I think in the Guard that's going to remain stagnant for a lot of folks over the years. Is that able to be massaged, your duty title, or does that have to match something in MIL PDS? Like for example, can your organization internally create structure to show an improving responsibility?
So here's what a lot of FSSs and I have probably a little difference in opinion on. I will try my best to force duty titles that capture what individuals do. Now, what we can't do is we can't give you a mobility pilot AFSC and then not call you a mobility pilot. So you have to be an aircraft commander, but could we do / and call you a scheduling officer or something like that? That's where sometimes FSSs will say, this is the duty title that goes with this on the manning document. We can't change it at all. I would encourage your leadership here and you all to sit down together, look at what you're actually doing, and to decide if there's any way that if the duty title you have in place right now accurately reflects, and if there's any options there. So I don't want to go sideways or have you go rogue, but to have that conversation and look at different options for what the FSS can do to try to make sure what you're doing and the progression of responsibility that you have is accurately reflected. I would encourage that. You got anything else to add to that?
No, that is good. And Colonel, you just correct me if I'm wrong. When we get to certain promotion areas and they start looking at your record and like it says, oh, air mobility pilot, and you didn't monitor that during your career, we can't go back and change it. It's hard and it slows down the process. It takes time. And usually we're trying to smooth out the writing process to make you sound better, not working something in the system that was an easy fix a while ago if we had just put the correct duty title, or what you really should have been, squadron commander.
Same topic for technicians, but my chief of training is a technician, and that's his technician job. I'm writing on an OPR. Can I include the chief of training, or am I just stuck with mobility pilot?
So, let me give you my take on this. The AFI says that civilian employment, comments about civilian employment are prohibited unless it has direct relation to the military position and has impact on military performance. I think the technician job definitely qualifies as all of the above there. So I'll defer to official answers from your chain, but I like to take our dual status technician folks. I'm a technician, so unfortunately I'm the state public affairs officer. I'm an Army technician, and then I'm the director of strategic plans and programs at the headquarters. So my jobs have nothing to do with each other, but we still try to work in some of the stuff that I do for the Adjutant General into my military side. You have it very easy. Most of our people that are not a crazy anomaly like me, it should be easy, where you have a technician and their military job is very well nested with that. So I would encourage max participation in making the technician stuff kind of bleed over here to there. You got anything else to add to that?
How about an intel officer who's my intel officer but works at Joint Force Headquarters when he's not working for me? Who writes his OPR? Joint Force Headquarters?
Who owns it militarily?
We do.
We do. So can I include his Joint Force?
I'd have to look at the construct, but I would do that. So you just kind of gave an example like mine. We have to be careful in going too far with it, but I try to give folks credit, dual status technicians, the most credit I can for the great work that they're doing while wearing a uniform on both sides. Now, if you're a manager at Xerox, there's a lot more limited things that we can do. But Congress in the late 60s created this technician program, which is complicated, causes lots of issues for us sometimes, and this is one of those issues that causes us is sometimes we want to look at all those guys as, hey, they're civilians and none of that counts, but I would encourage a little bit different path.
Is that where you'd want to make sure you put that up in the duty, in the description? Like if
So-
you're talking about something that's not really.
There's where I would draw a line. Like for my OPR, I don't put that my additional duty is a state public affairs officer for the Adjutant General. I weave in the stuff I do as a state public affairs officer, but that's my technician job. So for me, and I would defer to you all and how you all decide to do it here, but I try not to draw those lines. Now, could you take your mobility pilot, and he's the technician, chief of training, but could you also call him an aircraft commander or IP/chief of training, and that's his military job too? My guess is you all could probably figure that out and maybe do it that way. So, sirs, I'm always open for any redirects you all have along those lines.
No, you're right on track, and we can share some examples from different folks' records, good, bad, ugly, and tactics, techniques.
Okay, quick, Travis.
Yes, sir.
Retiring 06, do I have to do?
Congratulations on making it to the end of the journey
Thank you, sir.
and not being fired.
Well, not yet.
Still got another month, right?
Close our OPRs on all my O's. You know what?
Are you the rater?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're the rater and you have 120 days of supervision on them, the answer is yes. Earmuffs, you could do some creative things to move folks other places, but it depends. If you're the commander, sir, and you got squadron commanders, that's almost impossible to do. But don't be confused. When you're the additional rater or the evaluator, no days of supervision are required. So it doesn't mean that you're sitting in your Hawaiian shirt 6 months from now and going, sir, you were the additional rater on this, and they just keep sending them to you, and they won't leave you alone. No, that should not work. So your responsibility is in at the rater, and then when you get a new group commander in as the additional rater, that individual will keep signing. Yes, sir.
Somewhere about the first 5 or 10 slides, you talked a little bit about bullet length, no wraparound sentences, but you said no sub-bullets. Can you explain or decode the proper, I see some dashes in some of your examples, there's semicolons, is there a right or wrong way to do that? I mean, what do you consider a sub-bullet? I used to think that was a double dash.
No, sir. So I should define my terms. That would be helpful, shouldn't it? So a sub-bullet is you write a bullet. There's a hyphen, a space, then the line. A sub-bullet is where you scoot 2 spaces over, then you put a hyphen because it ties up to this bullet up top there. That's a sub-bullet. So don't leave a bunch of extra white space in the form. When it comes to whether you use double dashes or semicolons or 3 little dots to link your action to your impact, that's a local thing that you all can figure out how you want to do. I like mixing it up so it just looks different, but I'll use all 3 of those things I just gave you. So I would do whatever the bosses want, but I wouldn't waste too many brain bites on that piece.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think I've worn you all out. So, hey, thanks for your attention again. I'll hang around a little bit after, and I'll certainly be here tomorrow morning, answer whatever questions extra you have. Thanks for your time.